I grew up in the Philippines, in my grandparents' old house. It was a big place, full of character, and an even bigger unfinished basement. That basement always felt colder than the rest of the house, and it was where most of the strange things happened. When my grandparents immigrated to the States, they left the house to their children. We stayed and kept living there. Over the years, each of us had our own moments. Weird, unexplained things that, when pieced together, made one thing clear. That house was haunted. One of the first stories I remember came from my mom. She was cooking lunch one day when she saw my aunt walk across the living room, dragging her slippers the way she always did. Thinking she was home, Mom added a little more food to the pan for her. When lunch was ready, she called out. No answer. She called again, louder this time. Still nothing. That's when she realized she was completely alone in the house. Another time, she was cleaning our bedroom, which sat right next to the basement stairs. When she opened the door to sweep, she saw a man going down the steps. He was shirtless, wearing jeans, dark-skinned. At first, she thought it was one of my uncles, but when she checked, no one was home. The house was empty, silent. Years later, my uncle had an encounter of his own. He was in his upstairs bedroom late one night when he looked toward the window and saw a shirtless, dark-skinned man staring back at him. The thing is, that window was on the second floor. No balcony, no ledge. There was no possible way anyone could be standing there. My experience happened while I was chatting with my cousin in the dining room. The master bedroom, the one my uncle used, was right above us. While we talked, we started hearing the sound of heavy furniture scraping across the floor. Chairs, maybe a table, being dragged. I figured my uncle was rearranging things. So I went up and knocked on the door. No reply. I knocked again. Still nothing. Confused, I went back downstairs. Less than a minute later, the doorbell rang. It was my uncle, just getting home. The room that had sounded like it was full of movement had been completely empty. But the creepiest story came from my cousin. He was talking to our grandparents after they returned from the U.S. When he glanced toward the basement stairs, he saw an arm. Just an arm. It was waving at him, motioning for him to come closer. He told our grandfather immediately. Now, my grandpa wasn't the kind of man who got scared easily. He was a World War II veteran, a man of deep faith, and not someone who backed down from anything. That same night at 3 a.m., he went down into the basement, alone, and called out to whatever was there. He didn't see anything, but I'll never forget how serious he looked, and how unafraid he was. Even now, that house still gives me chills. It was never violent, but it always made its presence known, mimicking family members, moving furniture, watching from places no one should be able to stand. And no matter what we did, it always seemed to come from the basement. It happened 2 years ago, on a cold October night. I was driving home after a late shift, past midnight, the kind of hour when the roads feel deserted and the world seems to hold its breath. The air outside was damp and quiet, and my headlights stretched into the fog, like pale fingers reaching through the dark. I remember thinking how peaceful it was, until it wasn't. As I turned onto the old highway that cut through the woods, the radio started to hiss with static. At first, I thought it was just bad reception, but then, between the bursts of white noise, I heard something, a whisper, soft, drawn out, like someone breathing my name. I froze, my hands tightening on the steering wheel. For a moment, I thought I imagined it, so I turned off the radio completely. Silence. And then, from the back seat, a slow, deliberate exhale. My stomach dropped. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Nothing, but I could feel it. The weight, the presence. It was like someone else was in the car with me, watching quietly, too close. I didn't dare turn around. Every instinct told me to just keep driving. The next few minutes felt like hours. Every passing shadow on the trees outside looked like a figure moving just beyond the light. Finally, I reached a gas station and pulled in fast enough to make the tires squeal. I jumped out, heart pounding, and flung the back door open. Empty. No one was there, but the seat belt in the back seat was buckled. I unlatched it with shaking hands and looked around the lot. Not a soul in sight. The clerk inside looked half asleep. I didn't even bother trying to explain. I grabbed a coffee, stayed there for 15 minutes, and told myself I was being stupid. It's funny how your brain tries to find logic in something that clearly isn't logical. When I finally got home, I parked, turned off the car, and sat there in silence. Then, from the back seat, a faint click. The seat belt, sliding slowly back into place. I didn't sleep that night, and for weeks afterward, every time I drove alone, I caught myself checking the mirror, expecting to see someone sitting quietly behind me. Some nights, I still hear that slow exhale, like a reminder that whatever hitched a ride that night never really left. It was the summer of 2016. I had just moved into a small apartment on the edge of town. It wasn't much, cracked walls, old plumbing. But it was cheap and it was mine. I worked nights back then, so most days I'd get home around 3 a.m. The neighborhood was quiet. Too quiet sometimes. That's when I first saw her. The first night, I was locking my car when something caught my eye. A face in the window of the apartment across from mine. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old. She had long black hair, and her eyes looked huge in the dim light. She wasn't moving, just staring straight at me. I waved, half expecting her to disappear, but she didn't. She just tilted her head slightly and smiled. Something about that smile didn't feel right. Too slow, too still. The next morning, I asked the landlord if a family had moved in next door. He looked confused, said the unit had been empty for months. When I told him about the girl, he just shrugged. Probably a reflection, he said. I wanted to believe that. So I did, at least for a while. A few nights later, I was in bed scrolling on my phone when I heard tapping. Not loud, just a faint rhythmic sound, like fingertips against glass. I froze. The window was right beside my bed. Tap, tap, tap. I slowly turned my head, and my blood ran cold. She was there. That same girl, standing outside the window, on the 3rd floor. Her face was pressed against the glass, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, like she was trying to whisper something. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then just as suddenly as she appeared, she was gone. No footsteps, no sound, just an empty window and the faint outline of a handprint left behind. I barely slept that night, and the next day, I begged the landlord to check the unit again. He finally agreed. When he unlocked the door, the apartment was exactly how he'd said, completely empty. But on the wall facing my window was a child's drawing, crayon lines, stick figures. One looked like me, standing at a window, and beside it, a little girl with a long black dress and a smile, drawn too wide. I moved out the next week. But sometimes, when I look at windows late at night, especially when it's dark enough to see my reflection, I swear I still see another face, smiling back at me. It happened during a thunderstorm, one of those nights when the wind howls, like it's trying to tear your house apart. I was living alone then, in a small 1-bedroom apartment, on the edge of town. Rain was hammering the windows. Lightning flashed every few seconds, bright enough to make the shadows in my room jump. Then the power went out. Everything went dark. For a few seconds I just sat there, listening to the storm, waiting for the lights to flicker back on. But they didn't. Instead, I started hearing something else. A faint tapping, somewhere near the front door. At first I thought it was the rain. But this sound was slower, deliberate, like someone knocking. Trying not to be heard, I grabbed my phone, used the flashlight, and walked toward the door. Every step made my heart beat louder. I peeked through the peephole. Nothing, just darkness. Then lightning flashed again, and for half a second, I saw it. A man, standing perfectly still in the rain. He wasn't moving, wasn't even trying to come inside, just standing there. His face was pale, almost gray, and he was barefoot, barefoot in the pouring rain. The next flash of lightning came. He was gone. No footsteps. No sound of him walking away. Just gone. I locked every door, every window, and sat on the couch with my phone clutched in my hand. A few minutes later, the power came back. Lights flickered. TV buzzed on. That's when I saw it. Muddy footprints on the floor, leading from the front door, all the way to the middle of my living room. I backed into the corner, trying to breathe. Then lightning struck again outside, and my TV turned to static. A faint whisper came from the screen. At first I thought it was interference, until I heard the words. I let myself in. The lights cut out again, and in the glow of my phone's flashlight, I saw the reflection of wet footprints. Fresh ones, right behind me. I don't remember what happened after that. I woke up on the floor, the TV off, the lights still dead. The footprints were gone. No mud, no trace. But I moved out that week, because sometimes the scariest thing isn't what's standing outside your door. It's realizing it already found a way in. I was 5 years old, too young to understand fear, but old enough to remember it forever. My family was staying in a small hotel in Laredo, Texas. I don't remember the room number or what we were doing there, but I'll never forget the stairs. It started with a little red rubber ball. I was bouncing it down the hallway, chasing it, laughing, carefree. At the end of the hall, there was a single flight of stairs that led to the basement, or at least, that's what I thought. I tossed the ball down, watch it bounce, and sprint after it, over and over, down, up, down again. The stairwell was oddly quiet. No echo, no hum from the hotel vents. Just my little footsteps, and the soft bounce of rubber hitting concrete. I didn't notice how strange it felt. Not yet. Then, during one of those runs, everything changed. I dashed down, grabbed the ball, and ran back up. But when I reached the top, I wasn't where I started. The walls were a different color. The carpet was darker. The lights dimmer, older, like the bulbs had been there for decades. The air smelled different too, dusty, stale. At first I thought I'd come up the wrong stairs, that maybe I'd taken a wrong turn somehow. But when I turned around, the stairwell was gone, just a plain hallway behind me, stretching endlessly in both directions. No signs, no people, just silence. And something deep in my gut whispered, "Don't go back." I clutched my little ball, fighting the urge to cry, and pressed the elevator button. It opened. Thank God it opened. I stepped inside, closed my eyes, and prayed that when the doors opened again, I'd see my parents. The elevator dinged, and there they were, standing in the lobby, the same old wallpaper, the same ugly carpet, the same front desk clerk smiling at me. Everything was normal again. For years I thought I'd imagined it. A kid's overactive imagination, right? But when I asked my mom about it as an adult, she said she remembered. She remembered how pale I looked that day, how I refused to go near those stairs again. Then she told me something that still makes my skin crawl. That hotel, it never had a basement. Even now, I wonder where I went, what floor I stepped onto, or worse, what let me leave. I don't really believe in ghosts. I like things I can explain, things that make sense. But there's one night I still can't explain, and no matter how many times I try, I can't reason it away. It was late afternoon. The sun was low, and I was alone in the kitchen, scrolling on my phone, when I heard it, a loud crash from the basement. It sounded like wood hitting concrete, hard. For a few seconds, I just froze, waiting for another sound. Nothing, so I sighed, told myself it was probably nothing, and went to check. The basement smelled like dust and old cardboard. The air was still, too still. Then I saw it. The bookshelf, the one that had been standing against the far wall for 5 years, flat on its face, Books everywhere. It didn't make sense. That thing was bolted to the wall. The brackets were solid. The floor was level. It looked like it had been pushed, but there wasn't a single scuff mark on the wall. I spent the next 20 minutes picking everything up, muttering to myself. Annoyed. Not scared. Great, another thing broken. Can't even trust cheap furniture. Talking out loud made it feel normal. Human. When I was finally done, I went upstairs, flopped onto the couch, and turned on the TV. Something mindless. Background noise. But I wasn't really watching. My eyes drifted to the black reflection on the screen between commercials. And that's when I saw him. A bald man, sitting next to me on the couch. Middle-aged, still, shoulders hunched forward, hands folded neatly in his lap. He wasn't moving, just watching. My whole body went cold. I turned around. No one. Turned back to the TV, and he was still there, not in the room, in the reflection. I stood up so fast, I knocked over the coffee table. The TV snapped to static, then went dark, and the room was empty again. Completely. That night, I didn't go back downstairs, and from then on, I started noticing something. Whenever people brought their dogs over, they'd freeze halfway down the basement steps. Every single one of them, ears pinned, bodies low, eyes fixed on the same far corner. Some would growl softly, others would whine, like they were waiting for something to come out of the wall. One time, my brother tried carrying his dog down there. It screamed, kicked, bolted up the stairs the moment he put it down. That was the last time we tried. A year later, I sold the house. Told myself it was time to move on. Fresh start, new city. But sometimes, when I'm watching TV in my new place, and the screen goes black between commercials, I catch myself staring into the reflection, and every once in a while, I swear I see a shape, just faintly, leaning forward on the couch beside me. Because once you've seen something that shouldn't be there, you never really stop seeing it.